Hebrews chapter 12, looking at verses 1 and 2, the title of this message for you note takers is Weights or Wings. Weights or Wings. Now, there are things in our lives that can either be a weight or it can be wings. They either weigh us down or they help us soar in our walks with the Lord. You know, when I was in the Marine Corps, way back in the day, we had to do PT. We had to go on runs at least 3 times a week. Now, had I gone up to the sergeant or to the lieutenant in my helmet, my flak jacket, my camis, and my boots, and I said, you know what, I'm ready for the run, they would have looked at me and said, dude, you need to shed that stuff. Those things that you have on, they can really weigh you down as you're trying to run this race that we're about to run. Those things are, hey, they're good things. In combat, you need a helmet. You need a flak jacket in combat and boots and things. You need those things, but not for this race. Those things will weigh you down. And so here, in this particular set of verses that we're dealing with, we're going to see how the author of Hebrews is going to let the believers know at that time that there are some things that can weigh us down, and there are some things that can help us soar in our walk with the Lord. Now, to give us just a tad bit of background, as you know, because you're well taught, as you know, the author of Hebrews, I just kind of leaned toward it was Paul. The author of Hebrews is writing to Hebrew Christians who were being persecuted for their faith, and they wanted to go back to Judaism. And so Paul is letting them know that Jesus is superior to anything you can go back to. And so this is why he has taken the time through these chapters to let them know whatever it is you want to go back to, Jesus is superior to that. He's superior to the angels. They believe that the angels were the ones who gave Moses the 10 Commandments, and he spends the first 2 chapters showing them how Jesus is superior to any of the angels. Well, in chapters 3 and 4, he's talked about Moses, and when it comes to the Jewish people, Moses was everything. And he told them how Jesus is even superior over Moses. And then as the chapters progress, he shows how Jesus is superior over the priest and over the Levitical priesthood. And Jesus is superior to all of those things. And he's letting them know, you want to go back, but Jesus is superior to what it is you want to go back to. Oh, I'm just going to share here. I'm just going to say, there are some of you here who are thinking about going back to the old life, back to the old ways. Oh, you haven't physically done that yet. But just like it says in Acts chapter 7, you remember how it says Stephen gave that great history of Israel in Acts chapter 7. He said, and in their heart, they wanted to go back to Egypt. And I'm talking about those of you who want to go back. Hey, let me tell you something. You're here today and you're here in church, but you know what? In your heart, you've gone back to Egypt. You've gone back to the world. And I'm here to let you know that Jesus is superior to anything you can think you want to go back to. And this is what we're going to be looking at in these particular verses. Now, look what he says there in verses 1 and 2. I'm going to read them, then we're going to come back and pick them apart. It says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnare us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and the finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Great verses, very familiar verses. Now let's go back and pick them apart. Look at the very first word, therefore. Therefore is a transitional conjunction that always takes us back to what was previously said. So because of what was previously said, this is why this is true. That word therefore is the transition between chapter 11 transitioning into chapter 12. So if that is the case, what is he making reference to? He tells us, therefore, since we also are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. That takes us back to the hall of faith in chapter 11. The great cloud of witnesses are not people who died and they're looking down from heaven upon us and hoping we'll make it through another day. That's not the case. Grandma not looking down on you from heaven. That's not what's going on here. He's making reference to what took place in the hall of faith in chapter 11, how there are those who were delivered by either going through their situation or delivered by being taken out of their situation. See, we look at deliverance only in one way. We look at deliverance only in terms of God taking us out of a situation. But God can deliver us by allowing us to go through. And this is something that we so often miss. Because we're like, God, please deliver me. I need you to deliver me. And you're looking for God to take you out of your situation. God may want to deliver you by you going through it. Or let's ask these Hall of Faith, these Hall of Famers of our faith in chapter 11. Let's just see how they dealt with things. Because, see, it's these people who went through some things that they give us an example of how we're to go through things. And we see that it was Daniel who had to go in the lion's den. He wasn't delivered from it. He was delivered by going through it. And so Daniel tells us when we find ourselves in the pit of despair, that God can deliver us through that situation. How about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Oh, they had to go through the fire. It wasn't like God kept them from that fire. No, they had to go through the fire, but the fire has a way of liberating us. And sometimes we just got to go in the fire, folks. Sometimes we have to. Because you remember when Nebuchadnezzar had them, Nebuchadnezzar bound them their hands and their feet, and they tossed them into the fiery furnace. Then the next thing we read is that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were just walking around in the midst of the fire. And Nebuchadnezzar looked. He said, didn't we throw 3 of them in there? He said, how is it that we see 4? And the 4th one is like the Son of God. Oh, don't miss this point. Sometimes it's better to be in the fire with Jesus than out of the fire where it's more comfortable. And we need to hear that. Somebody needs to hear that. So that means that the fire burned off those things, those ropes that they were bound by. And the fire has a way of burning off things and people in our lives that has us bound up. And the Lord has a way of taking us through the fire to burn those things and those people off. So sometimes we got to go through the fire. So there's deliverance. So these heroes of the faith, they teach us these things. Oh, David, we know. David killed Goliath. He teaches us that no matter what giant thing we find ourselves facing, that giant can come tumbling down. So these men in the hall of faith, they teach us some things. That's why the therefore takes us back to chapter 11. Because these people, they teach us a whole lot about deliverance and how God delivers people by taking them out of, but God also delivers people by taking them through. So let's see what else is going on here. Notice, he says, therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and every sin which so easily ensnare us. Oh, let's stop right there. I want to draw your attention to the word lay aside. Apothethemia is the Greek word. It's a word that means to lay aside, to put aside. It was used in terms of taking off dirty clothing. discarding that which is dirty or soiled. At the end of the day, you take off the clothes you had on all day and you discard them. You put them in the hamper. You put them by the washing machine to be washed because you've had them on all day. That's the idea of apothethemi. It means to put aside, to lay aside. It's the same Greek word that's used in Ephesians 4, verse 25, where it says, put away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we're members of one another. Put away lying, apothethemi. In James 1:21, when it says, lay aside all wickedness and overflow of wickedness, and let us, and it says, and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your soul. Lay aside all overflow of wickedness, lay aside apothethemi. In 1 Peter in 2, verse 1, said to lay aside all malice and hatred and all that kind of stuff. Lay aside apothethemi. Same Greek word. To lay aside, to put aside, to cast away, to cast off. So he's telling us to lay aside, notice, every weight and sin. Not some. Some people think, well, we can just lay aside some. No, notice he says, lay aside every weight. The Greek word for weight is akos, and it's only used here in the New Testament. This is the only place that word is used. And it means that which is impedes or burdens by weighing one down. Something that's heavy. It's watch this. It may not be a bad thing. It can even be a good thing. But now that good thing has become a weight in your life. And it's something that's heavy, something that's weighing you down. And it can even be a good thing. Because you know why I say that? Because, and here's the thing, it may not even be sinful. Why I say that? Because he says lay aside every weight and sin. We're going to get to the sin. So this weight, it implies that it's something that may not be a bad thing. It can even be a good thing, but that good thing is now a weight in your life, something that's heavy. What's weighing you down in your walk? You remember I said earlier when I was in the Marine Corps, if I came with a helmet, flak jacket, boots, and all that kind of stuff, that's great for battle, but not for running. Because those things will weigh me down. It would impede me running the race that I need to run. What's heavy in your life? Something that is good, something you've been doing, all of a sudden now it's heavy. It's heavy. And so he says, lay aside every weight, something that's keeping us from running the Christian race like we need to run it. It could be a hobby. It could be a habit. The point is that it is it's a hindrance. It could be too much. It could be too much TV. It's still said that the average American watches 7 to 8 hours of TV a day. Now, is something wrong with TV? Not necessarily. But now, has it become a weight? Has it become something by which we're vegging in front of? So it's something that can be heavy, heavy, heavy. So he says, lay aside every weight, notice, and sin. Now we need to talk about the sin. Hamartia, that Greek word, it means to miss the mark. So now, not only should we evaluate our lives and see if there's something weighing us down, but now we got to lay aside even the sin. What sin is hindering us? What sin is keeping us from running the race like we need to run it? Men, it could be pornography. It can be alcoholism. It can be, gossip and slander and all kinds of stuff. But it's sin. So not only will we lay aside the weight, but the sin as well. It's going to keep us from running the race like we need to run it, or at the speed we need to run it. So we need to lay aside every weight and sin. Now why? Why? Notice the last part of verse 1 says, because it says we need to lay aside every weight and sin which so easily ensnare us. This whole phrase in the Greek is euporistetos. It's an amazing word. It means to hinder a racer in every direction, to trap and hold as a prisoner. This is what sin wants to do. It wants to trap us and hold us as a prisoner. It's so easily, notice, so easily ensnare us. So whatever it is that's sin in our lives is so easily ensnare us. It wants to trap us. It wants to hold us as a prisoner to keep us from running the Christian race at the speed we need to run it. And we got to know that God sees these kinds of things. Drugs and alcohol, recreational drugs and prescription drugs. You'd be surprised how many folks are hooked on prescription drugs. And it's something that started out innocent. It may have been a work injury or a car accident, and they gave you those pills to relieve some pain. But now, you're good. Even the doctor said you're good. But now in your mind, you're like, you know what, but I'm still in pain. So I need to go to another doctor to get me a prescription so he can write me some for some more pain. But this doctor said you're good. Nothing a little Aleve or some Tylenol can't fix. But now you think you need the heavy stuff. And you convince your mind, no, I got to have the heavy stuff. And you don't realize you're hooked. You're hooked. And now that which was an unfortunate situation is now getting worse because now you're hooked. And you'd be surprised how many people are hooked. Folks, now got a problem with the bottle and alcohol and all kind of stuff. And, every alcoholic started out a social drinker. And now, we were talking about this. I was talking about this with your pastor. Folks, think it's okay to be sipping saints. And think it's a good thing. I mean, there's even folks of our ilk, pastors, think it's okay to sip and saint. No, not with all the other drinks on the market, and Pepsi and Sprite, Snapple, some good Snapple, some good flavors out there. It's all kind of great stuff. In the Bible days, they didn't have this kind of stuff available to them. They didn't. And so these things are trying to ensnare us and trap us and hold us as a prisoner. And you wonder why you can't run the race, or maybe you can't run it like you used to, because you've been ensnared by something. It's a thing. And notice it says, which so easily ensnare us. And then in the very last part of verse 1, it tells us to run with endurance. The Christian life is a marathon. And in a marathon, you need endurance. Oh, I would say maybe around 2009, I started running. I would play basketball 3 times a week, and I say, I've never seen a heavy or overweight long distance runner. I said, what if I train to run long distance if I see the weight come off? So I trained, kicked it in Marine Corps mode, and I trained, started running, started with 3 miles and 5 miles, and then I started 6 miles, and then, I started doing it for time, and then just started running and running. Next thing you know, I was running 50, 60 miles a week, and I was doing 2 or 3 half marathons a week with 10 milers, and I ran 15 miles. I did a few 20 milers. I ran a full marathon on the treadmill. 4 hours, 11 minutes on the treadmill. On the treadmill. Now, for you, hey, you guys live in lovely Southern California. You can go out. You already know the sun is going to be shining. You already know the skies are going to be blue. You know the temperature is going to be what it is. And you can do that. In Virginia, you can't do that. You don't know from day to day what the weather is going to be like. Yeah, the weatherman, he don't know. He don't have a clue either. So I got to do everything inside. We can't count on the weather. We can't say, 3 weeks from now, we're going to have a church picnic outside and enjoy the elements and stuff. Well, 3 weeks from now, you kidding me? But y'all can do that. 3 months from now, we're going to be outside and it'll be blue skies and sunny. So I've done that. And then during that time, I lost like 50 pounds. I said, it does work. But especially when I ran that marathon on the treadmill, I was folded up in the fetal position once I got home. I couldn't hardly move, shaking and all that. But it takes endurance. It takes endurance to run a marathon. So it says run with endurance. Hupomone is that Greek word. It means patience. It means endurance. It means to continuous. The Christian life is a marathon. We have to understand this thing is not a quick dash. This is a marathon. It's a marathon we're running here. The Christian life is. And I want you to notice, how are we going to endure? How are we going to keep going? Well, verse 2 says, looking unto Jesus. Aphoreo is the Greek word for looking. It's the same Greek word that's used in Acts 1, verse 10, where when Jesus ascended into the sky and the disciples stood looking up into the sky. The same aphoreo. It's the same Greek word. Same Greek word that's used in chapter 3 when Peter and John were going into the temple at the hour of prayer, and they saw the guy at the gate called Beautiful. And then when they walked by, they said, look at us. Aphoreo, same Greek word. It means to gaze upon, to look upon. It's a great word, to fix one's eyes upon. In other words, our focus in life and our gaze should be upon Jesus. You know why? Because he came down here to this earth and showed us how to run the race. He put on human flesh. You're talking about the ultimate of claustrophobic. Here's God, who is omnipresent, decided to confine himself to a human body. And he came down here to show us how to run this race with endurance. And so that's why we need to be looking unto him, because he showed us how to do it. If that word aphoreo means to fix one's eyes upon, where are your eyes fixed upon today? Who are your eyes on? Who are you looking to? Who are you looking at? If it's anything or anyone other than Jesus, you're going to be in trouble. It reminds me of Peter. You remember Peter in Matthew 14 when there was a storm and they were in the midst of that storm, and it said Jesus came walking on the water, coming toward them. And they thought he was a ghost. They cried out, "Oh, ghost," and they freaked out. And all of a sudden, Peter looked, he says, "Lord, if that's you, bid me to come out there on the water." Jesus said, "Okay, come on." Now, I don't know about you. It wouldn't have been no "if that is you." I would have made sure that was Jesus before I got out of that boat. He said, "If that's you." And I can just see the scene. Here it is, the disciples all in the boat and all that kind of stuff. And, and he's climbing out. Hold the boat still. And he's looking. And then it says, well, when he saw the winds and the waves, that they were boisterous, he began to sink. And God said, and Peter said, "Lord, save me." The shortest prayer in the Bible, "Lord, save me." And it says immediately the Lord reached down there, snatched him up. Now, it doesn't say it, but it's implied. He started to sink when he took his eyes off of Jesus. And because he can't be looking at Jesus and then looking at the winds and the waves around him at the same time. So he took his eyes off the Lord. And so too, we will begin to sink when we take our eyes off of the Lord and put it on the storm in our lives. We will sink in despair. We will sink in depression. We will sink into hopelessness when we take our eyes off of Jesus. So if you're here and you're into depression, you're sinking in depression, into hopelessness, into all those kinds of things, I guarantee you've taken your eyes off of Jesus. I can guarantee you. And please, save the letters and emails. I'm not getting into the whole thing about depression and it's a clinical and this and the unique man. I'm not getting into all that. All I'm saying, and that's why I said save your letters and, you can send them to Pastor Brandon. You can send them to him. Don't send them to me. But I guarantee you've taken your eyes off of the Lord. Because whenever I find myself taking my eyes off of Jesus, I sink. I sink in depression. I sink into hopelessness. And when I find myself in that condition, the Lord said, what are you doing? And I'm having a little pity party. And the Lord just reminds me that I've taken my eyes off of him. And that's what I've done. So that's why it says, looking unto Jesus. Notice who is the author, Archeos, is where we get architect from. He's the architect and the finisher tetelestai, is the root of tetelestai, where Jesus said in John 19:30, it is finished. Well, that root there, tetelestai is that word, but tetelios is the word used here. He's the author, not only is the architect, but he's the finisher of our faith. He who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. You know what that lets me know? We're going to make it. He started the work in us. He's going to be faithful to complete it. He's going to complete the work in you. He's not going to allow you to sink underwater. Now, if I was Jesus, when Peter started to sink, I would have let him fill his belly with a few gallons of water and let him gulp down. And as he's going down for the last time, maybe I would have grabbed him and snatched him and threw him back in the boat. But that's not what Jesus did. He says, immediately the Lord reached down there, grabbed him, and said, oh, Pete, why did you doubt? And the thing is that the Lord would do the same for us. He would reach down and he would grab you immediately because he loves us. You ought to thank the Lord that I'm not God. You ought to thank him. I'd have been like, okay, boys, let's get in this boat, get out of here. Let Peter, just let him, he'll figure it out. And just, no, that's not what he did. So we see he's the author and the finisher of our faith. And notice who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. How was Jesus able to endure his cross? It was for the joy that was set before him. Joy is a quality of the Spirit. Happiness is dependent upon external circumstances. I got a raise at the job. I'm happy. I'm sad because I got a letter from the IRS that just took that raise money that I just got. Now I'm sad. So happiness is based upon outward circumstances. Joy is a quality of the Spirit. You can have joy in the midst of sorrow. You can have joy when the world is crashing down around you, because joy is not dependent upon external circumstances. It's a quality of the Spirit of God. For the fruit of the Spirit is love. I know you say the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. Stop. It says fruit, singular, is love. Agape love. Out of agape love comes joy, peace, long-suffering, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, kindness, and self-control. But the fruit is agape love. And out of that comes joy. So when we receive God's agape love and where our lives are filled with it, it will produce the joy and the peace and the long-suffering and the kindness and all those other great qualities. You know, do you know how to really judge whether you're growing in the Lord or not? See, you judge growing in the Lord by how many times you come to church, how often you read your Bible, how often you pray, which those are great things. But the true way to judge whether you're growing in this walk with the Lord and when your relationship with God is, how are you concerning the fruit of the Spirit? Are you more kind today than you were yesterday? Do you have more joy this month than you did last month? Are you more self-controlled today than you were this morning? See, that's how you judge whether you're growing in your walk based upon the Spirit of God, the fruit of the Spirit. Are you growing in these things? Or are you still the same mean person you always been? You haven't gotten no kinder than, But this is how you judge these things. This is how you got to look at this walk with the Lord, because we're running a race with the Lord. How do you know whether you're running at the right speed or a worse speed or a faster speed? How do you know? Look at your life. Is the fruit of the Spirit evident in your life more so this year than it was last year? That's how you judge. Because there's people who call themselves Christians that they're not very kind. A lot of Christians are not very kind. Oh, I see it on the road out here when I'm driving out here. It's crazy out here. People, they're just, I have a stickler. I have a pet peeve. A pet peeve of mine is when you don't use your turn signal or your blinker, whatever you call it out here. When you don't use that thing that's supposed to signal you turning or getting in and out, when you don't use it and you just all of a sudden you just see the car merging over like this, that just drives me up a wall. So when I got to hit my brakes and then you get up on them and then you look over at them, they just looking straight. They don't want to look at you because they know what they did wasn't right. And you got a lot of Christians that's not kind. You got Christians, they're driving. The guy got to merge over. The lane is ending. Next thing you know, he'll be on the rocks on the side of the road. So he got to get in. You inching up. You don't want to let him in. And you're a Christian. A lot of Christians aren't very kind. I'm telling you, I need to fast and pray before I get on California roads. Because I'm telling you, nothing will get me more in the flesh than being out on these roads. I mean, it took me 4.5 hours to drive from Costa Mesa on Friday to Santa Barbara. 4.5 hours. Oh. And then driving back from Santa Barbara to get here for the conference yesterday, it was about 2.5, 3 hours or so. And the traffic and the bumper and and then all of a sudden, and then you get through a certain part and it's clear sailing. Everybody doing 90, it's good. Then all of a sudden you got to scream, and it's like, what is it? What's going on here? You get a little bit further and you're like, what happened? What was that for? Oh. I had to get back in the spirit to even come for the conference, I was just so much in the flesh. So Jesus was able to endure his cross and despise the shame of it. It's because of the joy that was within. In order for you to endure the cross, your cross, and despise the shame of it. And men, your cross is not your mother-in-law. That's not your cross. Not your cross to bear. But in order for us to endure our cross and despise the shame, it's the same way. It's going to be for the joy that was set before us. And then it says, as he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Sitting down at the right hand speaks of a finished work. That the work the Lord did is finished. This is why he said, Tetelestai, it is finished, it's done. It's a done work. And the Lord is not just sitting back and saying, redeeming people like Tony is a lot of hard work. I'm so glad I'm sitting down. No. He's not just sitting there with his feet up and saying, I'm so glad that's done. No, no, he's sitting down. The Bible says he ever lives to make intercession for you and for me. The Lord ever lives to make intercession for you. You made it through this week because the Lord prayed you through. You made it through this weekend so far because the Lord prayed you through. He ever lives. It's not that like the work is done from that perspective. His redemptive work is. Yeah, that's a finished work. But he knows people like me is still a hot mess, and he needs to keep people like me in prayer. So he ever lives to keep praying for us, to make it through another day. And so these are some great things that the Lord has spoken to us. And this is what I want to conclude with. What are the weights and the sins in your life that so easily has you trapped? And whatever it is, the Lord wants you to lay it at the foot of the cross. He doesn't want you to leave here still with a trap. You know, the trap, it reminds me of, you've seen when hunters are in the woods and, you know, they have that little round thing there in the middle and they place the food there, and when the animal comes, it just, boom, it just grabs them. That's what happens. Satan is setting all kind of traps. So when we step in it, it just grabs us. Whatever that is, the Lord wants you to lay it at the foot of the cross and deal with it. Lay it at the foot of the cross and don't leave out here. I don't want to see anybody walking out with that trap still on their foot. Leave it here. Whatever it is, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's prescription drugs, no matter, Jesus came to set the captives free. He says, whom the Son sets free is free indeed. He wants you to leave here free indeed. Not just free, but free indeed. He wants you to leave it here. And the choice is yours. Are you going to leave it here, or are you going to continue to try to do life with a trap on your foot? Or are you going to continue to try to run the race with a helmet, a flak jacket on, and boots? Lay that stuff aside. May be sin, but it may be a weight. And whatever that is, the Lord wants you to leave it here at the foot of the cross because he loves you. That's why. And if you're here today and you have not repented of your sin and accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior, today is a day of salvation for you. Whoever that is, because see, there's a lot of people who think that they're a believer just because they might come and sit in a chair like this. But the proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the changed life. Is your life different? Is it changed? If not, Jesus wants to change that for you. And so we're going to close in prayer, and then I'm going to have Pastor Brennan come back up and wrap things up. But this is our time to deal with us. This is between us and God. Whatever it is that's in your life, or maybe a weight, or it could be a sin, or it could be both. This is where we lay it at the foot of the cross.